All right, we get this question all the time. My beer is foaming. What did I do wrong and how do I fix it?
Oh man, there's so many different things. I mean, is the beer overcarbonated? What's the inner diameter of your tubing? How long is your tubing? What's the temperature?
Let's start with the common things. So the number one thing I think happens to many newbies is carbonating, and they accidentally overcarbonated. And you pretty much know that's it because it just comes out nothing but gushing foam. There's no redeeming beer at the bottom. The more you pour, the more it just stays the same. We have a whole video about overcarbonation and how to carbonate, so please watch that video for that. So let's talk about the next thing that I think causes it almost always, and especially if you've had beer pouring before, and that's going to be temperature. And we're not always talking about the temperature of the beer. A lot of times we're talking about the temperature of where that beer is coming out, especially if you have cool looking metal faucets on a 100-degree day or a 90-degree day or an 80-degree day, and they're out and they're not sweating. And so if that faucet isn't sweating on a hot day, that means as the liquid comes through, you're going to be heating or cooling that off, so it's going to be heating the beer, and that is what's causing the nucleation point, the point of which the CO2 is going to come out of solution, thus causing the foam. So if you have a scenario where you pour the first one and it's all foam to the top, pull that aside or dump it, pour another one, and now all of a sudden you have this much beer, and then you dump that and you pour the third, fourth, and then all of a sudden you're getting great pours. That's exactly what's happening. And there's not tons that can be done. A lot of bars, they count on that. That's just what they do. These kegerators have a fan button here that will turn on a fan that can help blow cold air up in there. That helps, but on a hot day, that's not going to do you much good. Let's go over the next thing that could cause foaming, which I call line size and diameter.
Yeah, so depending on the length of your line and the inner diameter of there, and there's a calculation, I don't know it off the top of my head, but you need, X amount, 6 feet generally It's a restriction issue. Yeah. So if you have soft tubing, which is what I'm used to calculation-wise, 3/16 inner diameter beer line tubing, I think it's just under 2 feet of restriction per linear foot. So we always used about 5 to 6 feet depending on what pressure you're going to serve at. And that just balances the pour. Now we're using these slicker tubes, and they're actually a smaller diameter. They're also in millimeters, so I get lost. I'm an American, I apologize. And but it's roughly the same feet. So for most of us, when we buy our kit, when we make our first thing, we already have the right amount. What a lot of people accidentally do is go, I don't like all that in there, so I'm just gonna cut it off. And that can cause it. That's just the restriction that's helping keep the CO2 in solution on its delivery. This kegerator or this faucet has a flow restrictor. And so we can balance just a hair. Most people think, oh, this will solve my foaming issue. Wrong. For the most part, if it's really hot, this adds more metal, so thusly more problems. So this helps you when you have a flow balance issue, but it doesn't really help you if you're heating up too much because it's even more mass to cool down as the beer flows through. Speaking of restriction, I know we're talking kegerators, but like a Jockey Box.
Yeah.
And that was one that was always, for me, you're starting to get foaming. It's actually counterintuitive, but you actually turn up the CO2. You want to talk about why we do that?
You'll probably know better than I do, but essentially if you're under pressure, under pushing on that liquid coming down and it's coming out, it's going to go slow and thusly let out the gas.
Spending time in that 30-foot of tube, little bigger diameter inside there because it's trying to get a bigger surface area to cool your beer as it passes through. So you actually want to raise the CO2 where you would think to lower it to stop the foaming, but it's you go up higher, about 25 psi.
The other thing is I've seen some pretty crazy setups out there where people are changing diameters in their beer line. And that's not the greatest thing. The more smooth it is, the less transitions it goes through. You gotta have some, but the smaller diameter and the less openings, the less chance of nucleation points, the less chance of gases coming out of solution, so the less problems you'll have. So here's a simple test to know, where's my foaming problem happening? And if you happen to have a picnic faucet, this one happens to be on an EVA barrier tubing. This one also actually has a flow restricted QD. You don't need all this. Just any one that you especially know it's going to pour well off of. This is a great way to test where's my problem coming from. If you click that right on the keg and you pour a glass of beer and it pours really well, you know your problem is downstream. And 99% of the times it's going to be the temperature of where it's pouring out of. And really there's not a ton you can do except try to cool that down. The cool part is if you're having a party and a lot of people are pouring beer, that'll happen naturally. But if you're out with two buddies, out having a beer every half hour, it's gonna happen. So you can use a dump bucket if you're not worried about wasting a little beer. You can run, like we talked about, this one has a built-in fan. You can put a fan unit in your own with a little computer fan and try to direct it up the column. Those help, but aren't gonna solve it. I know one guy who literally before the party put ice packs and such all around to pre-cool his tower so that when his guests come over, he takes all that off obviously, but it's got a better chance of not. Also, storing it not or having it not directly in the sun helps a ton. That pretty much wraps it up when it comes to how to fix your foaming problems. But if you have a very unique situation, never be afraid to either write or call our CS team. They're happy to help and they have tons of different scenarios that can help you out.